Hey everyone and welcome. Today, we're tackling a challenge that every single organization faces: how to manage risk effectively. But look, this isn't just about dodging bullets. It's about making smarter, bolder decisions. We're going to dive into how you can connect your company's biggest goals with a world-class framework to do exactly that.
It really all boils down to this one simple question, right? Every move we make in business involves some risk. But how do you know when you're in that perfect sweet spot? Take too little risk and you just stagnate and you never grow. But take on too much and you could be facing a total disaster. Finding that balance is what this is all about.
And this just goes to show you there is no single right answer. It's completely different for everyone. Think about a tech startup. They live on a high appetite for risk. They have to embrace failure to innovate and grab that market share. But a hospital? Totally different story. They're going to have an extremely low appetite for anything that even hints at compromising patient safety. So the right amount of risk? It's always tied to what you're trying to achieve. So that brings us to our first huge concept: risk appetite. The best way to think about it is as your organization's guiding compass. It's the thing that keeps you pointed in the right direction, especially when you're navigating some pretty uncertain waters. In the simplest terms, risk appetite is just the amount and the type of risk you are consciously willing to take on to hit your targets. It's a deliberate balancing act, right, between the awesome rewards you're chasing and the potential losses you might have to swallow to get there. And this isn't just some vague business buzzword. It's got a formal, official definition from ISO Guide 73, which is the companion guide to the big ISO 31000 standard. The key words here are prepared to pursue, retain, or take. That really highlights that this is an active, strategic choice you're making, not just something that happens to you. Okay, so how do you actually write this down? Well, it usually comes in two flavors. You can be qualitative, using broad terms like we have a low appetite for safety risks or a high appetite for market innovation. Or you can get really quantitative. We're talking specific numbers, like setting a maximum financial loss you are willing to accept, period. Now, if risk appetite is your compass, then ISO 31000, well, that's your map. It gives you the structure, the process, the routes for your journey. Let's take a quick look at what this thing really is. Here is the most important thing you need to know about ISO 31000. It is a guideline, not a rigid rulebook. You can't get certified in it. It's all about providing principles and a process that you then take and adapt to fit your organization like a glove. Its core principles are actually pretty simple, but they're incredibly powerful. First, it has to be customized. It's got to fit your strategy, your culture. Second, it has to be integrated into how you make decisions every single day, not some separate thing the risk people do. And finally, it has to be driven by leadership. The folks at the top have to set the tone. Okay, here's where the magic happens. This is where it all comes together. We've got our compass, that's our risk appetite, and we've got our map, that's ISO 31000. Now we've got to use them together. This connection is the absolute key to managing risks strategically. So think of it this way. Your risk appetite is the why. It defines your purpose. Why are we willing to take on this financial risk? Because we believe it's going to lead to the market growth we need. It connects the risk directly to your goals.
But just knowing why isn't quite enough, is it? You also need to know how much. And that is where risk criteria come in. This is what translates that big picture why into specific measurable limits. So if your appetite for credit risk is low, your criterion might say any single deal over $1 million is a no-go. See, it makes the abstract concept totally operational.
And finally, the ISO 31000 process. That's the how. That's the step-by-step framework you use to find risks Analyze them and then evaluate them against the criteria you just set. So the appetite sets the direction, the criteria set the boundaries, and the framework gives you the method to do the work.
All right, so the theory sounds good, but how do you actually do this? Let's get super practical and walk through a 5-step plan to put all of this into action.
Here's the roadmap. First, get the bosses on board. Second, write down your specific criteria. Third, actually use those criteria when you assess risks. Fourth, make sure it all lines up with your strategy. And fifth, keep checking in on it. It's a cycle. Okay, let's break each of these down.
Step 1 is the big one. It's totally non-negotiable. This process has to start at the very top. The board, the C-suite, they have to be the ones who define and truly own the risk appetite statement. It's a core part of the company's strategy, and it needs their full, visible support to work.
Now, in step 2, you take that high-level statement from leadership and you translate it into something your teams can actually use day to day. This means documenting clear metrics and thresholds, like what are our key risk indicators? What are our hard financial limits? It's all about making it real.
And now you put it to work. In step 3, every single time a new risk pops up, you assess it against these criteria you've already defined. Does it fall within your acceptable limits? Great, maybe you accept it. Does it cross a line? Boom, you know you need to take action. It takes all the guesswork out of the decision.
Step 4 is basically a big reality check. You've got to make sure your company's grand strategic plans are actually compatible with your risk appetite, right? There's no point in having a super conservative risk appetite if your business goals are incredibly aggressive and risky. They have to be in sync, or the whole thing just falls apart.
And finally, step 5. This is not a set it and forget it deal. Your risk appetite is a living, breathing thing. You have to constantly monitor if you're staying within your limits. You have to report on it, and you have to review the appetite itself. The market changes, your strategy changes, your appetite might need to change too.
So after all that, what's the big deal? Why does linking your appetite and the ISO framework matter so much? Well, it's about a massive shift in how you think about risk. It's about moving from just reacting to problems to being truly strategic and proactive. It turns risk management from a cost center into a real competitive advantage.
And this is the ultimate payoff. When you connect that compass and map, you get a single, clear approach to risk that everyone understands. You get consistent decision-making from the newest hire to the CEO. You make sure what people are doing every day actually lines up with the long-term vision. You stop just putting out fires and you start steering your ship through the storm.
So I'll leave you with one final thought to take back to your own organization. Are your biggest strategic moves being guided by a clear, well-understood risk appetite? Or are you just kind of rolling the dice and hoping for the best? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.